Hey everyone, welcome to Live Life Better. I am Scott Eastwood, and this is my podcast. That's right. I'm starting this podcast because I want to help people, and I want you to live the best version of your life. I'm going to be interviewing a ton of different interesting people from all over the globe, and I've been having a great time doing it. I've been doing it for the last couple months now. We have a ton of episodes in the bank. We will be releasing and sharing with you all, hopefully to give you more insight on your life and teach you something new about what other people are doing. And in this first episode of the podcast, I interview my good buddy Bray. I cannot tell you his last name. We will remain him nameless for this one, but we talk about a ton of cool stuff. We talk about what it's like to be a celebrity, this famous culture we are obsessed with, echo chambers. We talk about fake news and a ton of other cool stuff. So check it out. Let me know if you like it. Bray, welcome today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Scott. Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, it's actually, it's kind of like the man with no last name, right? So instead of...
Well, that kind of means that we've got meaningful conversation and other things to explore than, what's your last name?
It's true. Yeah. And, anonymity is hard these days.
It's atypical. Everybody wants to be famous, it seems.
I know. Everyone wants to be famous doing nothing, though. Like no real skill set,
sure.
Which is kind of a problem because then no one's really creating anything. Like famous is a byproduct. It's a byproduct for something, for someone or something that has created something, whether it be art or advancements in science, whatever that may be. It's sort of it's a byproduct, but because of our culture, it seems like it's so fucked up now.
It's the end goal.
It's the end goal.
Yeah.
And you see all these young people, that's all they want to do. They all want to just be famous on Instagram or not work. And you're like, no, that's, you got to create.
Yeah. You wonder where this all came about. Maybe it's the everybody gets a trophy culture.
Maybe.
And, it seems that merit is much less a factor in people's profile. You look at any representative look at politicians.
Sure.
Look at the reality TV stars. I mean, nobody's based on anything other than hot air and self-promotion.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be when we were young dudes, you walk softly and carry a big stick. And then people do their talking for you.
No pun intended.
Yeah. Never. But yeah, you look at, even in sport now, you get guys that are getting attention. We've got this big China thing going on with, I'm sure you guys are up to speed on the UCLA guys.
I'm not, actually. But you know all about sports. So people who don't know Bray, I'm going to just give you a little bit of background just because I like to toot your own horn just for a second. Bray I'm sitting with him so people who can see, he's 6'7"?
6'6".
6'6". He'll downplay that. Bray was a walk-on basketball player at Santa Barbara College. Wait, UC Santa Barbara,
UC
right?
Santa Barbara.
UC Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
Which, for those who don't know, he never played professional basketball. He never was groomed as a young lad growing up. You literally just walked on the team, right?
Yeah, it's one of those fun stories that gets picked up on, and people make a big hubbub about it.
Well, it is a big deal. It's you have to be an athlete to do something like that, and then you have to be like pretty adaptable.
Sure, and just to give you like the 2-minute story about it.
Sure.
I grew up in a rural area, had to commute into city for high school. There wasn't really much going on with athletics, and I've always been of the mind is that if I'm going to invest my time and my attention in something, I want to return on that investment because that's time and attention you don't get back.
Sure.
High school sports weren't going to be an avenue for me to go do anything spectacular in life or facilitate any entry into university. So I didn't really participate, and I never really was much of a joiner. I went into UCSB based on grades. Mm-hmm. And my sophomore year, towards the end, I found myself at the rec center, and the men's team was in there playing pickup ball. It was off season for them.
Well, what did life look like at that time? Were you were just broke college student?
Life was but a dream, man.
Living in
Santa Barbara,
6'6",
living in Isla Vista.
Dude.
Yeah, my college experience to that point, I had 15,000 good buddies. That's kind of the type of college town it is.
Sure.
In fact, I think west of the Mississippi is the greatest population density in the country.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I was working at the Santa Barbara Zoo. I was a night security guard.
That's amazing.
I would go on from 4:30 to 12:30 every other week. So I'd work 5 days on, 7 days off.
Really?
And I'd be the only guy there from about 6 o'clock till 12:30 when my relief would show up. The 32-acre property, keys to all the, and just going back, this will date me a little bit, but I found the job on a newspaper classified ad, and when I showed up,
Wanted
the guy,
zoo faculty,
security guard at the zoo, I think they're paying like $11.50 an hour, which was,
Wow.
I think minimum wage was maybe $5.25, so it was unreal.
Wow. Yeah, what year was this? Circa
This would have been 1999.
1999.
So I show up, and my soon-to-be boss looked at me like, "How old are you?" I'm 19, sir. He goes, "Well, I've never had anybody under 40 apply for this job." I said, "Well, I'm your
Amazing.
guy. I'm not going anywhere. I'm your guy." And so he gave me a shot, and it was great. So I was happy. I had money in my pocket. I was doing grades. We were living right on the ocean. Life was great. For whatever reason, it just happened that the men's team was in there playing one day, and they needed an extra guy. I agreed to jump in there and help them out.
This is a pickup
Just
ball
pick
game.
up ball at the rec center where all the students play. And 2.5 hours later, we finally finished up the run. The guy's like, "Hey, man, you need to walk on. Like, you really could do something with this. You're a beast." And I was like, "Yeah, right. D1? You guys are D1? Why don't you just come out to my house and have a party this weekend? I got 8 kegs coming, a DJ. So we became buddies. We forged a relationship, and they would invite me out to play pickup ball. And I'd always kind of poo-poo their suggestions to go talk to the coaches about walking on. And they kind of took the step, which was a big turning point for me. They snuck a couple of the coaches in, and they said, "You got to come watch this guy play." And off to the side, I didn't know who to be looking for anyway. I didn't know they were there. They approached me after one day of playing and said, "We want you to come in and meet with us tomorrow morning." And
That's incredible.
I wasn't quite sure what that was going to mean. I was the only non-player that was involved in these pickup games, so I didn't know if I was maybe in a little bit of trouble or what the deal was. And the next morning, I came in there, and coach sat me down with all the assistants and managers and basically interrogated me, and like, "Where have you been? What, you didn't play high school ball? Well, what's going on? How did somebody miss on you?"
Yeah.
It turns out my coach is Bob Williams, who just retired last year, and just a great guy. And back to the merit-based discussion we had earlier, it was a big thing for a walk-on to even gain consideration for playing time at a game. A walk-on at USC is just practice
You
fodder.
pretty much redshirting.
You're
the whole
just
time, right?
meat, no shoes, no money, no book money.
Yeah.
And you just show up in your body for people to beat on. But unlike most of the other D1 programs, coach was a merit-based guy. And when we stumbled out of the gates my second year after having practiced for a full year with the team, we were kind of in a little bit of a slump to get out the gates, and we weren't performing, and coach kind of called a meeting and said, "You're going to be the guy. We're going to bring you off the bench tomorrow against Pepperdine."
Wow.
I think we were 17 or 16 and a half point underdogs at home against them. And, it was a big step for me. I don't think I slept a wink that night.
Yeah.
We came out and beat them by 17. So we crushed the spread by 30 some odd
Yeah,
points.
Vegas would have been wrong, huh?
And from then I was off and running. And it was great because much like my entry into the program, it was mostly player driven, and once you gain the respect of that peer group, it carries up the chain. And then if you are getting time over guys that maybe are full scholarship players, it's not as if a coach is playing favorites and going over their head. You're truly a man of the team. And so it was great. We ended up making a tournament run that year, and we played Luke Walton's team from University of Arizona out at the pit in Albuquerque. And that was a big CBS game, and it was great.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you go from walking on to getting a scholarship. Did I jump ahead?
Yeah. Well, so after we finished that tournament game, we played them real tight. I think that if we would have had a little bit more parity on an officiating standpoint, we may have pulled that game off. I think we were up by 5 at the half. But after that season was over, I was kind of hoping to get that call from coach and say, "Hey, we want to put you on scholarship." And I didn't get that.
Is that something that's a normal thing?
No. And typically it's, I hate to pull up this analogy, but if you meet a young lady and you start dating and things move quick and she's playing for free, you going to put her on Scully or, so. So at any rate, we had lost a couple of seniors that year and we were going to be a little bit shorthanded in the post. I saw myself have a little bit of leverage there. It was maybe my biggest bluff I'd pulled off to that point in life where I kind of just withdrew from team activities for a week until I got
this
the
is
call.
coming in like third year, right?
Yeah. So this was this would have been 2002.
Wow.
And coach called me up and said, "Hey, where you been?" I said, "I'm not sure, coach. I'm not sure how I fit into this whole thing." And I kind of leveraged a little bit, and I think he wanted to offer and was planning on it, but we got that thing sorted out, and I got to come back and was on a full ride from there on out, which was incredible.
That's incredible. I mean, that's incredible. You literally go from working at the zoo, right, 5 days a week, to now you're playing for a D1 basketball league, and all of a sudden you're getting your whole college paid for.
Yeah, it was probably the best phone call I've ever placed to this point in life was when I got to call up the old man and say, "Hey, go ahead and take that checkbook and tear it up because I got this covered from here on out."
That's incredible.
And it was a great feeling, and also a big turning point in the relationship where he became more of my peer, and less of an authority figure, because then at that point I was kind of floating my own boat. But I will backtrack on one thing that I kind of gloss over because everybody wants to talk about the fun part, like full ride and you're playing on TV.
Sure.
That first year and a half was brutal.
Really?
I came in,
just like a learning curve standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, came in knowing nothing. I hadn't played ball since 8th grade. And then also giving up a lot of the freedom and autonomy that I had the first couple of years up there. I had roommates that were, I love them to death, but shiftless layabouts with open checkbooks from mom and dad.
Yeah, sure.
And so, I'm find myself getting up early in the morning. Money's now getting tight. I'm not working. And I'm getting up and going to weights at 6:30. Come back, shower, go to class, come back, grab lunch.
They're still in bed.
Yeah. And I'm just going, this could be a lot easier.
Yeah.
But, stay the course. And, I think the other big part for me was a little bit of the mental side of it was the first time in my life I'd ever not been the man with athletics. In youth sports, I was always one of the better players. And I actually was trying actively to have my friends kind of keep it under wraps that I was getting involved because I was embarrassed. I'm devoting all this time and energy and the opportunity cost from a financial standpoint, a fun standpoint, and I'm not getting any return. I'm not dressing for games. So I didn't really even want anybody to know because who wants to be the guy that's never playing?
Yeah.
Looking back on it, I wouldn't have it any other way. And I think that was a huge advantage for me over guys that had been entrenched in that type of involvement in sports, that there wasn't a single guy in my squad that hadn't played year-round basketball from 6th or 7th grade on. So when we're showing up for practice, this is like my 20th practice of my life. I'm fired up to go out there and get it done. These guys are clocking in like some old vets. This is thousands of practices and tens of thousands of repetitions. So that was a huge advantage for me in terms of being both physically and mentally fresh to go out there and take the space, so to speak.
You were able to use your enjoyment for the sport at you're kind of like a new kid, right?
Oh, 100%. And think about the advantage of coming in with such a lack of ego.
Sure.
And I wasn't, all these guys were the best players on their teams in high school. They were the best players in their cities, most of them.
Wow.
So coming in there and ask a guy like that to make a sacrifice for the betterment of the team, it's a tougher sell for a guy like that who's been the star before versus a guy like me who's just going, hey, that's going to get me on the floor? You want me to go knock that guy down?
Yeah.
Let's go,
I digress there. I just wanted to bring people up to speed because I thought it was really interesting that you walked on, what were you talking about with you're bringing us up to speed?
We were talking about the UCLA guys.
What's going on with UCLA?
So we got this LeVar Ball guy. We were just kind of in that idea of he who blows the most hot air these days gets the most Twitter hits, most whatever these kids are following on social media, and there's lack of substance behind the people that are popular these days, it seems.
Yep.
And so you got this LeVar Ball guy who's talking all this mad shit about his kid is going to be the best. This Lonzo Ball kid who's playing for the Lakers now.
Okay.
So he's also got 2 other sons, which are going to be fairly unburdened with expectation as well. The older son is actually a player. He's still going to be disadvantaged by all this attention that his dad's bringing on him.
Just because he's got some shoes to fill now?
He's got the whole league gunning for him. He's got his dad standing up on his little rooftop and screaming, "Oh, well, he's going to do this to John Wall." And John Wall is like, "I can't wait to give this kid the prison treatment."
Jeez.
And so he's put a big target on his kid's back. And at any rate, he's got 2 younger brothers. One of them now plays for UCLA, and they're over in China right now. And these guys got picked up yesterday for shoplifting.
In China?
In China.
Oh, wow.
And, I mean, didn't we just get done watching that guy from the North Korea, the kid they sent back in a coma?
Oh, yeah.
You just don't
gosh.
go to these countries and fuck around, man. That's just not the way you do it.
No. Well, you don't do it.
So,
I mean, yeah.
So, at any rate, we were kind
What's
of just...
going on with them? Are they being held?
They're being held. I heard on NPR on the way up here today that LeVar Ball was talked out of giving a press conference, which probably would have gone as well as our current president up on the podium, But it's interesting because Trump is out there right now. So you just add more ugly American behavior on what was already a grand tour, I'm sure.
Sure, yeah, sure. It's like the guys at the Olympics. What do they do? Destruction of
destruction of property. And I mean, anything we can do to further our profile, they're doing the best.
Anything we can do,
and it kind of just brings you around to like who's representing your organization, your cause, and I see so much of what are polarizing figures stepping up to be spokespeople for whatever their cause may be. Like, here's an example. Okay. I'm a member of NRA, and not because I'm particularly aligned with them, but hey, when I went to go get some firearms last year,
they made you sign up.
They gave me a better deal on the background check and free gun insurance. What the hell? Let's go. I'll give me a free sticker for the old man's pickup truck, and we're in.
Sure.
So now they call me every other month.
They call you. What, looking for money?
They want a survey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I guess I acquiesced one day and gave them a nice survey, and now they call me every other month. Well, the last call I get from them is, hi, we would like to talk to you about your assessment of President Trump's performance to this point. Would you be interested in taking the survey? I said, yeah, sure. I said, yes. And she goes, okay, thanks, have a nice day. And I said, no, the yes wasn't for my approval. The yes was for my consent to be involved in your survey. You see, they try to slide that by so they can make it look nice. And I said, I'll go ahead and preface this by saying I'm not really partisan on either direction.
Yeah.
I don't really have anything personally against the guy. But that being said, I think that we're shrinking in numbers, gun owners are, responsible gun owners. And then if you're going to align yourself with somebody that's going to go out and represent the brand, represent the cause, if you will, maybe it should be somebody that might appeal to somebody on the other side of the aisle. Maybe it's somebody with a little bit of diplomacy about their mannerisms and the way they conduct themselves. And you look at pretty much any organization with any profile these days. You can go on the other end of the spectrum and look at PETA, right? So you got tree hugging on one side and you've got gun pounders on the other. But either way, the people that are speaking for these groups of people are not doing anything other than being abrasive and parroting back in their echo chamber
like
for the
polarizing it, right?
And you've already got a captive audience, right?
It is interesting that we don't have sort of a middle ground with a lot of these issues. It's like we don't have people going, look, like we get that there are people, let's say for PETA, right? We get that there are people that like to hunt, or there are people that like to eat meat, and that's whatever, but we want to respect them. We also want to respect, certain species that we're trying to bring back to life, or we're working hard to, reconcile a decimation of, why don't we have that?
Well, I think we do. And I think that we've probably got 70 to 80% of the population that kind of fits in that reasonable category.
Reasonable.
Right? But that doesn't gain the headlines. That doesn't fuel the flyers.
Clickbait. Yeah.
You look at the extreme left and right, it's probably, 5% of the population? But they're governing the entire discourse about whatever topic that we're discussing.
Sure.
And, I know plenty of hunters. I know plenty of hippie chicks and hippie dudes. There's a lot of crossover between the two, but the people that they're following are kind of antagonizing things, and they kind of stir it up.
Sure.
And keep people from bridging that gap and maybe realizing that we have a lot more in common than we don't. I'm big in the off-roading hobby, right? So I love to get away.
When you say off-roading, you mean like going out to the desert, right?
Yeah. And, we're constantly demonized by Sierra Club folks, right? Oh, you're out there destroying the environment, you know. These motor vehicles, you know, if they had their way, they would completely shut that down. And in doing that, they're antagonizing our group when we should all be working together. You know, it's funny. You look back at like the first conservation attempts in this country, which was Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, the guy was like the biggest hunter that the presidential office has ever seen. Sure. He was actually camping out in tents under the stars without Secret Service. You know, I mean, he went out to Yosemite with John Muir, and that's what kind of galvanized his resolve to go ahead and start the national park system.
I didn't know that. That was part of when John Muir was.
You just hiked that trail last year, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
I did a section of it. I've done a couple sections through the years. It's if you've never been, it's one of the most incredible section. The section I think is about maybe 80 miles or so. The actual John Muir Trail, whereas it ties into the Pacific Coast Trail, which is pretty much from Mexico all the way to Alaska, right? Which is like, you know, some people do it. They take 6 months of their life, they pack up, and they just go. Yeah. So what I've done a few times is pretty nominal.
It's more than probably 95%, right? So
that may be true.
Yeah. Until they get the new VR app of the John Muir Trail, you've seen what most have not. So
it is pretty cool.
But you know, back to Roosevelt, there's a guy who cared about the environment, but took what he needed from it. And that helped him gain respect for it, and that familiarity with wilderness and with nature is what provides that perspective to value it. But if you're kind of antagonizing and demonizing parts of people that have this experience with nature and groups of people that have this experience, then you're defeating your own ultimate cause. And I mean, this would be like the Sierra Club versus the Off-Road Club, right?
Sure.
But we're all out there to enjoy nature.
Well, what's interesting is too, you know, like the demonizing of things, right? So you go on the news now, right? If you click on the news, you click on Google News or whatever your source.
Are we talking blue news or red news? Because there's no news.
Matter, right? There is no news. I mean, right, you read the news, you're misinformed. You don't read the news, you're uninformed, right? So, but what we do read, and when I say we, I mean the general populace, they read headlines, right? It doesn't even really matter if it's true or not, right? So I chalk a lot to clickbait, right? So this is how people are making a lot of money, right? These news organizations, they're throwing out wild titles, right? And that's going to cause people to click on them, and you know,
it's irresponsible.
It's very irresponsible.
And not only that, they're not waiting to verify and make sure that they've got the right story, because in their rush to be the first news organization or channel or station to break that news, they're trying to get the jump on the competition. And it's easier to print a retraction on page 15
it doesn't
a couple
matter.
days later.
It's nominal. It doesn't even matter. You know, it doesn't matter for them.
And it's tough, because in these times especially, where do you go for solid information? I mean, and everything is so polarized.
What do you listen to, BBC?
You know, even BBC has been showing a lot of favoritism and a lot of bias. They've been getting sucked up into this PC social justice warrior nonsense. You know, and we're ramped up in this movement where it's almost as if nobody can agree upon a set rules of reality to kind of build us a foundation to start having conversations. So, you know, feelings now are mattering more than facts. And
100%. Well, that's the thing, is everybody is a news source now, which is beyond me.
And everybody's an authority. I watched a YouTube video on it, Scott.
Everybody's an authority. Everybody can say something on Twitter or social media, and all of a sudden it's in the news. It's shocking what they print. They say, you know, this person from Twitter commented about this, and they have their side, and they said this. And now it's where's the responsibility lie, right? With these organizations, like,
and the news cycle sped up. So
what was that, Tim?
I was just going to say, on the plus side, it's bringing to light the fact that traditional news sources are often full of shit too.
100%.
Yeah.
Because before we used to trust those things, and now it's like, hey, look, man.
Yeah. We know who's behind your motives and your agenda, and you know, I think that the internet is going to be what we really need to all get together and circle and defend. Because this is really the only way for folks to get together and talk frankly about things. You know, if you've got a TV show and you've got sponsors that are bankrolling that show, there's going to be certain topics you're not allowed to touch. There's going to be certain truths you're not going to be allowed to acknowledge. And it just muddies the waters.
Sure.
And it's a shame that people's feelings and agendas, or be it financial, be it the indoctrination of all this PC stuff where people aren't allowed to hold an opinion. I mean, really quickly, just you kind of look at the word fascism, and you've got Antifa, and you've got, all your right-wingers, and the left is always, as far as I could remember, stood up for freedom of speech, exchange of ideas, discourse, whether you believe something or not, you'd be allowed to have the conversation. And now they've gone full circle and they become fascists themselves. If you looked at what happened with Yiannopoulos up at Berkeley, and you see these other alternative-minded speakers coming to a college campus, which is supposed to be a forum for a free exchange of ideas. Sure. And they're shouting these folks down. And I mean, to be fair, do you know who Milo Yiannopoulos is?
No.
He's a pretty interesting cat. He's more like a court gesture. I think a lot of his stuff is more to be provocative.
Sure.
But he's basically a very flamboyant gay guy.
Was Breitbart.
Yeah. And basically a very flamboyant gay man who espouses a lot of views that are probably held by more of the conservative folks, and he's calling bullshit on all this PC nonsense.
Sure.
And he's got the ability to do it because he's one of them. Right. So it's an interesting thing. And I mean, he crushes me sometimes. Some of the stuff he says, and once again, he's not a good representative for reason or thought, but he is good at exposing them on what their hypocrisies are and how they lie.
I'll have to check him out. That's interesting.
Yeah. Like I said, not now with Yiannopoulos, he's doing this to be provocative, but if
sure.
you look
Well,
at
this is probably his business, right?
Yeah.
So this is how he's making money, which you have to remember, like that's the primary source of, a lot of these people too, right? So you're like, what is their intention? Oh, okay, they're going to paint themselves outside the box here because they're building a brand for themselves.
Yeah, you've got to basically caricaturize yourself and become more than just a talking head. You've got to be a personality above and beyond just a reasonable person trying to talk.
Sure.
But speaking of guys like that, there's a guy named Jordan Peterson who's out of Canada.
I've heard of him, yeah.
And he speaks a lot of sense, and he's a gentleman, and he, these college students at his schools that he's gone to, they show up with bullhorns and air horns, and they shout them down.
Silence them, really.
And it's like, hey, if you think that a person's ideas, if he's presenting them in a dignified manner, like a gentleman,
sure.
If you think that his views are wrong or are superior, and you can show him the light, well, extend him the same courtesy and sit down and debate him. But they don't want to do that. They want to show up hundreds deep.
Well, no, look at the people who are putting the things on the social media, right? They're not in it for a debate. They're just in it to say whatever they want to say, and they can, they're not gonna put themselves, they're not gonna put their balls on the line, or put themselves out there and say, hey, look, I'm willing to come to this forum and bring my argument.
Sure.
They're just gonna hide behind a computer, and I'm always like baffled because I just don't have time in the day because I'm so busy. I go, where do people have the time to go on these forums and create all this thing? I think there's a lack of adversity, right? If people have enough time to do all this shit, like, what are people doing?
Well, here's the crux of the issue, Scotty. Who does have the time?
Where's the time?
It's the 5% on either end of the extreme spectrum. The rest of us are out here being productive. We're working. We're getting our lives done. I mean, you probably know I've never had a Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't even have a LinkedIn profile.
I like that.
People at my company, I mean, all disclosures aside, I work for a Fortune 500 company. It was ranked in the top 20 most admired.
What do you do? Tell us what you do.
I sell medical device.
Okay.
Hospitals, surgeons.
And how'd you get into that?
It's real similar. In fact, I think by the time I'm an old man and I write my book, it's going to be titled Walking On, because it was a very similar scenario to the basketball thing.
Well, you called me a walk-on player the other day, and I thought that was pretty funny.
We'll get to that in a sec, because I think there's parallels to be drawn and advantages that we share in our chosen industry. But when it comes to how I got into what I'm doing now, it's one of those relationships you forge on a personal level, and an opportunity arises, and a person identifies potential in you and suggests you give it a shot. And without that suggestion, without that extra nudge, you maybe don't go in that direction. Much like my teammates on the basketball team that basically took no for an answer. Wouldn't take no for an answer. Said, no, we're going to get the coaches to watch you if you won't come meet them. In this case, I pursued it, and a lot of my advantages were seen right out of the gates because I'm working with long tenured reps that remember the good old days when, the comp plan was more advantageous, the dollars came easier, competition wasn't as fierce, and I'm coming in with a limited frame of reference, going, this looks pretty good to me. This is my first sales training.
All perspective, right?
This is my first sales call. This is fresh and fun. I'm not jaded. I don't have an expectation as far as how things are going to go. Mm-hmm. And if you have positivity and optimistic approach, you're going to be all right. So, I think that being a specialist is where people are guided these days, from a young age. And, I have a lot of buddies with kids. And, will you work out Joe? He's going to try out for his team now. And will you give some time with him? Yeah, sure. And 3-4 years later, Dad will call me up and go, hey, Joe's thinking he's going to quit. I'm really concerned. I said, well, shit, has he been playing year-round ball for the last 4 years? Yeah. I said, good. He goes, well, what do you mean? He's on this path. I said, whose path? What path?
Yeah.
And I think that people, and it comes across all aspects of the spectrum, right? And we can get into it a little bit later because I want to get into some fun lifestyle talk with you as far as what keeps us young and vigorous. And, and I've got a whole kind of agenda there I'd like to push.
Okay, I like agendas. Let's do it.
But, when it comes to the specialization, you find that even at the highest levels in corporate America and science, that people get so far down their rabbit hole of specialization that they lose the context to even network with somebody in a different field that might, actually help connect some dots out there. And as a young person, if you're a generalist and you're a jack of all trades, you develop a depth of experience and interest and then a depth of character that a lot of people don't develop. And it gives you these options later in life to go, I think I'm going to take a right here and go sell some medical device for a bit, see what works out. Where a lot of my buddies that kind of got entrenched into a career path, be it medicine or law, it's not what they thought it was going to be when they started.
Sure.
They're too vested to turn back.
Yeah.
And
man, that's such a problem. Yeah. You see people and they know it's miserable and you just going, you don't have to, you just want to reach out and say, you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
You don't have to go all the way in.
Yeah. It's tough because the pressure there is just astronomical.
Sure. Imagine having like 200, 300 grand and being able to say, well, I'm going to chalk that up to a loss.
Well, look at my surgeons, for example. Okay, these guys mortgage their high school fund, nose in a book.
Crazy,
right? Highly competitive to get into their Ivy League undergrad education.
Sure.
Okay. Then they sacrifice the college years. They sacrificed the 5 years after college, medical school residency. And now they're saddled with, unless they got rich folks, which some of them do, some of them don't. Now they're saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. They've got insurance premiums well over their head. And that's not the same scenario they had planned for themselves in the 80s when they were kind of starting off on this path, but you cannot deviate at this point. It's what, and the big issue is it's not really a function of, I've spent all this time and this money and now my expertise is here and I'll waste it if I leave. That's not what keeps them from leaving. It's the investment of the ego. It's the identification of this is who I am. I am a doctor. And that's one thing I've always sought to avoid in life is to be pigeonholed in with any group.
Sure.
I'm a big athletic looking dude. So my whole life people have assumed I'm some big dumb animal. Right? And so at a young age I went, oh man, I really got to make sure that when I speak with somebody and get to know somebody, they know right off the bat, like, you don't throw me in that hole over there.
Yeah.
And I always like that kind of diversity of interest and background. But, to bring it the other way around, when I was a kid, I wore glasses. So I was the kid wearing rec specs, trucking people on the youth football field. So, it's been a fun thing for me to never appear as I really am.
Well, you were smart. You said, I can choose to sound like an idiot. Or I can, present myself in a way that I respect, or you look up to other people, whoever was, a mentor when you were growing up, and you chose to do that.
Well, thankfully we had good role models for that. I had the opportunity to meet your pops And obviously we all feel like we know him just by, you know, the familiarity through the years.
Sure.
And he was kind of your gold standard for how a man should conduct himself.
A gentleman.
And my father, you've met him, very similar. And I think that a lot of these male role models have been softened up so much by the prevailing culture that now this impression of the browbeaten at-home husband whose wife makes all the decisions and makes him look like a buffoon is kind of permeated reality. I mean, this used to be just confined to TV when you had the fat guy on King of the Queens, you know, just getting punked by his little midget wife. And, you know, I'm all for balance in a relationship, but I think for a young man to see a dad who's less than a full-grown man, I mean, then what is your kind of, what cues are you taking?
Where's your baseline?
Yeah, and you know, and bring it all the way down to the grade school. You know, they don't let kids fight anymore.
Well, what is a man too? Is a man the one who continues to go and do his job that he's pigeonholed himself into in terms of, you know, your examples with lawyers and doctors? Or is it the guy that says, you know what, I've got one life. I'm going to take control of my ego. I'm going to figure out what's really important to me. I don't need the Porsche anymore.
Great question. And I would have to say, what promises have you made? And what promises are you going to be expected to keep? And if you've gone down that path of marriage and kids, I mean, you got to eat the shit sandwich. If your life is tough, but you've already got people counting on you, then the manly thing to do is stay the course. You know, and that's just kind of how I am. However, I've never really wanted to make a promise I wouldn't keep. And at this point, you know, I'll be 38 next month. And no marriage, no kids. And that's afforded me the opportunity to do anything and everything I've wanted to do to this point. But it's also going to be a little bit of a problem going forward, where am I willing to give up certain aspects of what keeps me good in life to sacrifice for these other goals that might pop up, you know?
Well, the thing is too is, and I know this just from personal experience, is the longer you do what you want, right? If you don't have kids, you don't have marriage, you don't have something tying you down. The longer you do what you want and you do you, right? The more set in your ways you become. Right?
Absolutely.
So the more you have a routine, and if someone fucks with that routine, you know, it's like, get the fuck out of here.
And routine, lifestyle, all the way down to, I mean, as simple as this, you know, and you're aware, I've been doing the full-blown monogamy thing. And I was a very well-accomplished bachelor in my younger years.
Yes.
And, you know, I'm having this discussion with my girl at the time. It's like, hey, you know, we're not going to just be sharing a house together if we go down this path that you're suggesting. We're going to be sharing a refrigerator together. And have you seen my diet?
Yeah.
Have you seen the way I take care of what I put into my body? And
sure, one would rub off on the other, you'd hope.
And you know, I know that we were out to dinner with our lady friends last week or something, and you and yours were on a pretty good page. But you know, it's a conflict, and it's not just between two people. Now, if she gets what she wants, we get married, and now we have kids. How are you going to tell the kid, no, put the fucking cheese pop down or whatever they want to eat? You know?
Sure.
If one parent is not willing to make that sacrifice, and frankly, it's just it's intellectually lazy for people to continue to consume junk food and not at the very least take an 8-week hiatus from all this crap and see how they really feel.
Look how easy it is. I mean, so it's the crux of the internet, right? On one hand, you have all this misinformation, but you also have an access to information immediately. No other time in the world we had that. Remember, I grew up, you grew up at the same time. We had to go to the library to learn something, right?
Dewey Decimal.
Check out a book that might not be there.
Yeah.
And now you can look up anything about anything.
And it's not even just the books. You've got these peer-reviewed papers that are coming out. You've got relevant, recent
studies,
information
real
at your
time
fingertips.
Yeah.
And the challenge is, how do you sieve through the bullshit? Back to what we were talking about with the news sources. How do you sift through all this to get down to really what really matters and what really is the way to go about it? Dr. Rhonda Patrick.
Rhonda Patrick
shout
is
out.
fantastic. She does a lot of on Rogan. I can't get enough of her.
Yeah. That's where I came across her, and you know, I just think that it's really not rocket science. And if people take the time to step away from it, it's just like a bad relationship. If you step away from those bad choices it becomes readily apparent that you were on the wrong path, and it's easier for you to hit reset. But you got to get to that 6 to 8 week period. Otherwise, your body is familiar and it craves these things. And, I'm not some Spartan liver. I still have some fun from time to time. But it's funny, if I go eat like a cheeseburger and fries, like the next day, I want to fuck another burger though. I feel terrible, but that familiarity's there. It lurks. And they've got armies of scientists at these companies coming up with the most addictive, the most delicious formula that you could ever come across. And it's by design. And you know what? I hate to break it to all the vegans out there, but a fucking cucumber is not going to compete with that. So you have to really make that conscious decision to pay attention to what that does to your body and how it makes you feel. And I don't think people have the time or attention to do that. They're so caught up in what's coming next, checking their feed. To your point earlier, where do people get the time?
I'm jealous you don't have social media. I have social media because of what I do, and I have a connection with the fans, and it's nice to be able to do that and to speak directly to them. But I'm extremely jealous because the time sometimes wasted on these platforms, if you accumulated it all, even just over the course of a week, what could you accomplish with that time?
And the time and attention, man. That's ultimately, those are our two greatest resources in life, right? You don't get, it's interesting. There's no two things that have such freedom associated with it. Oh, free time, free attention, but they're both finite. And at some point they're going to run out. So I just choose not to kind of put my time or attention in certain slots. And I find that I'm getting more productive in other arenas. And I love to lay around and be lazy after workouts and go like waste time thinking and daydreaming as well. But I certainly won't spend that time on junk TV, social media, celebrity gossip.
Yeah, you're a searcher. You want to evolve. You want to become a better iteration of yourself.
Yeah. Right? And I want to be more aware of everything. I think that we are so lucky to be at this time in this confluence of revolutionary scientific thinkers that are challenging the status quo. Guys like Sheldrake and Hancock are basically challenging the conventional scientific views, which are oftentimes now almost protected as if they were I wouldn't want to use the term religious, but there's a vested interest of ego and career attention with a lot of the professors, and specifically with anthropology, archaeology, that are resistant to new ideas because they've built this entire career in academia based on certain hypotheses or theories that they've forwarded. And as we learn more, those are in a position to be challenged, but they're not open to that inquiry. And so even the very ability to go question science, which one of my favorite quotes is that religion gives answers that cannot be questioned, and science asks questions that cannot be answered, and that's why it's always appealed to me. Sure. But now they're shutting down some of that opportunity to inquire and maybe figure out where we came from.
Sounds like they need to remake Contact with those kind of quotes.
Yeah, there you go.
Like a remake of Contact. Yeah. Did you like Contact, Tim?
Yeah, Contact's dope.
That was a dope movie.
Foster.
Yeah. That was a great movie. Yeah, that really questioned
I was crestfallen to find out that Jodie was lesbian. I didn't know that.
Really? I didn't know she was
lesbian.
You
didn't either?
Nope.
Well, Jodie, I hope we didn't out you, but somebody told me. Yeah.
She was very sexy back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, that southern drawl in Silence of the Lambs, I don't know why, distant second from Buffalo Bill, of course.
Distant second.
He was a hot chick.
Of course, yes.
But yeah, back to the information boom. And I think that we are on the cusp of, what Tim was saying earlier about us questioning the media, realizing and recognizing bullshit for what it is. And I'm really reluctant to go down the path of the family and the kids and the white picket fence.
You're having that dilemma now.
It's an opportunity cost for me.
Sure.
It will take my searching ability and basically stifle it.
Sure. Like your growth will be like, it's been like this, right? It's been at a steep
linear
incline.
Yeah.
And if you now decide, you're at an impasse where if you do that, it's going to soften, right?
You are forced to retreat within your family unit.
Sure.
The way that they've set it up. When we were kids, man, Dad could send us loose. Go entertain yourself.
Yep.
Now these kids are like little CEOs. Their Outlook calendar is superior to what mine is. I manage for $3 million in business. My day is less packed than these kids. It's unbelievable the way they get shuttled around from meeting to meeting. And so that becomes the norm. And so now if you're the parent, you're expected to be the chauffeur, the scheduler,
Sure.
the facilitator of all that is piano and basketball and swimming.
If you don't have the dough to have someone else, come in and take some of that.
And if you do,
load.
that's even worse.
Well,
because you're detached,
It's worse, I think, if to a certain extent, right? If you have enough dough where you're comfortable and you can still be a active participant in their life and implement what you see as strong values and this, that, and the other, then that's a different story. If you are disconnected because you just are lazy and you just have money you can throw at kids, and that usually becomes a problem.
Yeah. Or if you're super driven, like some of the guys that I work with,
sure,
and their job entails that they are committed. They're not necessarily, they're the furthest thing from lazy, but their priorities are just in the wrong spot. And to the point about like income and effectiveness of parenting, I'm trying to remember which Gladwell book I was reading. I want to say it was What the Dog Saw. You ever read Malcolm Gladwell?
I have.
Yeah. In it, he talks about, and he uses an analogy of red wine consumption, which was segues for our healthy, clean living. Right?
I like that.
And he's talking about bell curves and a linear progression in terms of your fitness and health. If you have 1 glass of red wine per week, your
Pull
health...
that up, Tim. Pull up the bell curve. It's you but what a bell curve looks like.
Yeah.
Just so people can understand, because it is interesting what you're saying.
So essentially, if you have 1 glass of red wine per week, you're a healthier person. And these are the studies that Gladwell's referencing, and
Sure.
I trust him. I don't have time to go, make sure that
check,
that if you have each glass of red wine up to 4 glasses of red wine per week is actually healthier for you. So you have this linear progression where 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4 is actually healthier. Right around the time you hit 4 to 6, you plateau out, and there's no perceived advantage between those two. Once you exceed 6 glasses of red wine per week, it becomes deleterious to your overall health. And then there's a similar progression on the other end. Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
So right on that middle is your plateau, and you exceed 6 glasses and you go on the downslope. He set that up as an analogy for median household income and effectiveness of parenting.
Sure.
The criteria that he referenced in the book, off the top of my head, I could be wrong, but I think it was achievement of the kids, overall satisfaction, mental health, and all these criteria that would mean that you did your job as a parent.
Sure.
And what he found is that
sure.
in much the similar fashion, from 0 to 75,000. Now, of course, you'd have to adjust for inflation. This is probably something for overall U.S.
Yep.
So we're in California. So figure 75 grand. What he's talking, figure, I don't know, was it 200 here? And so from 0 to 75, every dollar you make makes you a better parent. From 75 to 150, you plateau off. And after 150, it becomes deleterious to your ability to be a good parent to your kid, because I don't know what they say back in the 90s, mo money, mo problems. And you find a lot of these challenges. And I think that a lot of it has to do with what Roosevelt, we'll go to him again. It's
okay.
I've got 6 hours of podcasts on Roosevelt from History on Fire.
I like History on Fire.
He's rad.
He's great. With
I don't know if it's the I don't know if it's the accent or subject matter, but he's rad. But Roosevelt was a big champion of what he termed the strenuous life. And if you bring up a young person and they encounter adversity, they overcome it, they identify challenges and they master them, that later on in life, they're going to be better off for it. And I think that there's that correlation between that high income and the perceived softness of kids growing up in that sort of silver spoon environment, of which there are many exceptions. And in fact, a lot of my buddies that came from money kind of doubled down on that and said, no, I'm going to be as hard as possible.
Sure.
Because I don't want to be the guy showing up to baseball practice with like brand new Nikes, and I need to really, show them that I'm not just some guy who's here because I got all the shiny gear.
Sure. That's how my father was. He doubled down with his kids. He raised us, he's amassed an incredible amount of wealth, and he treated us like we were, go get a job.
Yeah.
You're 16, go get a job.
That's there's really no other way to do it, because ultimately you're going to inhibit your kids' self-confidence,
drive,
and self-value.
Yep.
And drive, but what's the fuel for the drive? Somebody can really want something to happen for themselves, but if they don't have the fuel to propel them, then what do? You know? And so you got to have the confidence to step on that gas pedal and grab the steering wheel and go.
Yeah. And when you are working, when you are forced to work, like we talked about, it's like, who has the time? Who has the time to be a social justice warrior when you have to get up and get to a fucking job?
Yeah. And when you do get the good job, are you going to bitch about it? No, you know what it was like. My dad was in the trades, general contractor.
Yep.
And in the summers, I used to work for him. And he always used to put me, I was like the scrotum on the totem, man. Like, like go pick that shovel up and go dig.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, man, when I'm on a conference call with other reps and they're like, oh, we've got to go audit all these consignments. Fuck, you guys serious? Are you guys kidding me?
I hear you, man.
This is white collar shit.
Perspective, right?
Yeah.
Perspective.
Yeah. And it helps you find your place in the world. And it also gives you a little bit of confidence that maybe if you had to, you could fall back and do a job that was shitty if that's what it took to get through the next year. And people price themselves out in life a lot.
Definitely.
And
they also get comfortable too. Like we're talking on this bell curve, right?
Yeah.
So I would imagine that there has got to be some correlation with the amount of money. At some point, you become you don't have as much adversity, and then so you're not challenged, and then you just you start to slide down the other side.
I forget the famous boxing trainer. I'm going to sign it to Angelo Dundee, who trained Ali. I could be wrong, but great quote in the world of boxing is, it's hard to get up and do road work when you're sleeping in silk pajamas.
Right? Yes, I've heard this one.
So, and we've seen this too, you know, with athletes. Some guys can handle it and some guys can't. And it's an interesting deal where you look at Jamarcus Russell, who played in the NFL. He was the #1 overall draft pick. I mean, just a friggin' beast. 6'5", 250, arm like a cannon, could run. He gets in the league and washes out within 2 years, drinking purple drink, right? Ballooned up to 320 pounds, and they cut him from the league. What's the difference between that guy and Brady, who gets drafted, after the 6th round?
Sure.
Grinds his way through, puts babies in movie stars and supermodels and wins Super Bowls, and the guy's as hungry as anybody in the league. He's 40 now, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting that drive early on in his life.
Look at Johnny Manziel, like #1 prospect.
There you go.
And within a year, it's all over.
Yeah, and it's too bad. And for Manziel, it's tough. He was limited from a dimension standpoint, and a victim of the hype. And it kind of carries back to what we were talking about earlier.
Never believe your own hype.
Is that kid, even if he didn't believe his own hype, and even if he would have done everything right, and he went cold turkey sober, which, I'm actually an advocate of, if you're the wild man on your team, you got to be the wild man on your team. I was the wild man on my team.
Really?
Nobody on my team knew what I was going to do next. I was a walk-on. I was the guy living on Del Playa and come out to the parties. And, these guys came into school, met only the athletes, met only the coaches. Their social circle was very limited and controlled. They went on their campus trips together, and everything was governed through the athletic department. And I opened up a window in a world to those guys where they're going, are you kidding me? This is your life? You want to be a walk-on? Look at all this,
Yeah.
So it's interesting that just people, they kind of just stick into their little clique, and I think they're missing out on life quite a bit, But back to the Manziel thing, what's that kid going to do? Man. I mean, you're not an NFL quarterback. Your body is just not up to that. But the media built him up as the next big thing.
Yep.
And he fell flat on his face, and I can't blame the kid.
Sure. He's
is he 5'9", 5'10"? What's he going to do?
Yeah.
So
call Ryan Leaf.
Yeah. One of our San Diego guys, Yeah. So, and Leaf is a guy who pretty much had everything he ever wanted in life and was Mr. Big Man on campus from, middle school all the way through high school. Never encountered any sort of failure or adversity. And that shit hit him when he was in the NFL. You get that first fall flat on your face out of your way as a young man. And then you got the confidence to have something to build on.
Sure.
And realize nobody's infallible.
Brings you back to square one, right?
Yeah.
So every experience is good for you, good or bad.
I agree. And I think the bad ones in this day and age, in this world we're living where we have smooth corners and everybody wears a Nerf helmet, and this is like the safety, sometimes you got to bust your ass to realize, hey, man, I better watch that move next time. And we're kind of insulating people. And now a lot of these snowflakes are coming out of college, and the first time anybody's told them no, they're a full-grown adult, and it's too late. Now the plasticity is gone. There's no
I see that a lot in the acting community, actually. It's a lot of young child stars or people who grew up in the business who never had to really work. They were on a TV show, they were young, or they were cast into this. They have people around them telling them yes, 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 yes. And then by the time they're, a walking, talking, full-grown adult, they really don't have any reference for how you're supposed to treat people, how what is a hard day of work, yada, yada, yada. The list goes on and on and on.
I can imagine.
So, it's tough because I have the reference, right? I had to valet park cars. I had to work construction. I had to bartend.
Yeah.
So I know how lucky I am just to be here, and I'm just, counting my blessings every day.
And to the point earlier about what it felt like for me to show up to practice. This is my 20th practice in my life.
Yeah.
I mean, that's you walking onto a set. You're fresh, you're invigorated. People pick up on that energy. I mean, it doesn't have to be something that's verbally transferred. People can just sense it. And then they go, I want to be around that guy. I want to work with that guy. That guy's got his shit together. He's happy to be here.
Yep.
And I mean, that's half of it is, and then it's also being comfortable in your own skin.
Definitely.
You've had enough experience in life. I've had enough experience in life to know that not any one activity or interest will define me. So what puts people at ease? Other people that are at ease. And that's like the big challenge with like a sales call is how do you put somebody at ease? How do you put them in a comfortable position? If you yourself aren't comfortable naturally, there's nothing you can do to bring them into the fold.
Sure.
But if you walk
that's
in,
through life experience.
Yeah. And I think that people get into this path of specialization and protection and safety, and they don't try new things.
100%.
And,
like we said, getting comfortable.
Yeah.
Getting comfortable. It's the death. It's
Yeah.
the death of us all. So what will you do next? Now, I know you say, we talk about the next chapter, right?
Yeah.
I have the same struggle with that you do. I question, do I go down the road of kids and family?
Yeah.
Do I do that, or do I choose a different path?
Yeah, it seems as if options are so enticing. And
a lot of options.
When you began the question, I'm going, professionally, what would I do? And then above and beyond that on the personal level, it's tough. I think that anytime I've ever tried anything in life, I've always made a pretty good run of it. So that is almost a bit of a curse, because I know I could pigeonhole myself into a situation where I was the round peg in a square hole,
Sure.
make the best of it. And, you look at your relationship with your parents, and you'd love to have that one with your kids one day. And, what about all this material crap that we've accumulated? Who's going to get that?
Crap.
Scotty, who's going to drive my Bronco when I'm gone? You know what I mean?
It's just a bunch of crap.
But when you step back from all of that and you really look at the big picture, I'm not some huge fan of a fairy tale ending. I'm pretty sure that,
Disney movies have sort of skewed us all.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe all dogs go to heaven,
Maybe.
but I'm not convinced that I'm going anywhere other than back to the ether that I came from before I had consciousness when I was born. And if that's the case, and I'm not up in the merry sky looking down at my kid enjoying life, then what's the whole point there? And is it worth the sacrifice coming up? I see a lot of people go down this path with me, and they say, oh, well, the enrichment of your own life and your perspective will change with your kid. And I look at it a little bit differently. I go, well, look at the opportunity cost on expanding your own horizons, your own understanding of the world with that time and energy and attention that you devote to a kid. And I think if I were to be talked into having kids, it would be to make the world a better place. But I think you could touch a lot more kids being a coach or an advocate of life choice or whatever you want to be. I think that if I found myself in my 40s without a wife and kids, I'd find an outreach program and touch a lot of young lives, and so I don't think I'd be missing out on that. And, I think, I still coach kids a little bit in my spare time, and I get a lot of satisfaction out of that.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, there's 5 or 6 a year I see that come back from college at my athletic club. Hey, coach, how are you? I mean, that's gratifying as all hell. And if I didn't have my own, I'd probably be fulfilled. So then it comes down to, do you have a partner that is the perfect match for you? And that's the perfect outcome for you guys. Yeah. And I'm trying to work through that, because nothing in life is perfect.
No. And that's it's easy to sort of, you have to sort of start to realize, I think, that nothing in life is perfect, and you're going to have to make sacrifices. So whatever you do, and that I'm starting to realize that. I struggle sometimes because I don't know, my dad's 87 and I struggle, with the thought of, well, will my father know his own grandkids, right? If I don't have kids.
Yeah.
So, and pretty soon, right? I mean, like, if we're talking about, me waiting 15, 20 years, like, he's probably not going to know.
Yeah.
My dad lives an extremely healthy lifestyle. So he's got a tremendous advantage and a mental advantage because he stayed so busy, right? So he could go another 15.
He's sharply
years.
tuned.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
What do you think would be more important? Your dad gets to know your kid, or your kid knows of your dad?
I think selfishly, I would want my kid to know his father. It's a very selfish thing, right? Having kids is selfish, right? I mean, probably the least selfish thing we could do is adopt.
Yeah.
Right?
Because absolutely. Well, actually, let's be real. The best thing we could do for the planet is to not procreate.
Definitely.
That's certainly
and
an
to
abundant
stop those
resource.
who have 9 children from procreating.
Yeah.
Octomom.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Everybody needs a little buddy. And
it's a selfish thing. It's just, let's be honest about it. It's selfish. Like we want to see ourselves survive our species, right? Ourselves, right?
Or we get bored in life and we need a new toy.
More adversity.
Yeah. Or, here's the big thing that I think that I'm contending with right now is that you've got a group of friends or peers that have this expectation of, oh, you're 30 now? Why aren't you married?
Definitely.
Why aren't you have kids?
Oh, man.
And it's, it's interesting. I really look at how women view the world in a lot of cases, and I'm very impressed. And they're definitely whooping male ass under the age of 30. Academically, professionally, the earning potential of women coming right out of college is exceeding that of men. I mean, they are crushing it. But it's frustrating to see them fall into the same kind of pitfalls, I think, with for lack of a better term, that I see their interests are still in reality TV, which is not real. They're taking social cues from people on TV.
Sure.
They've got friends that have kids that bitch and moan all the time about the kids and how difficult it is in life, but yet are being judged by those very same friends for not having their own little kids. And it's just kind of it's an interesting thing. It's another one of those echo chambers in a positive feedback loop
100%, where you just you put yourself what you want to hear. You surround yourself with people who don't know what echo chamber is. I love that. I love that you reference that because it's so true. Like we consume what we want to consume.
Yeah.
Well,
because the choices are all there, and you know what you like.
Yeah.
Or do you? Or are they really choices? And that's the thing. It's how deep are you willing to dive, and how much time are you willing to take to kind of look into what the best option is for you. And I just, I see my buddies operating out of a position of fear where they're saying, I don't know if I'm ever going to date a woman this great again. I really don't want to lose her.
Sure.
Time is getting short.
But then like they're responding to direct pressure from that other, their significant other, right? And they're not making that decision.
Transferred from her friends, right?
Yeah.
So that shit all rolls downhill.
No, 100%. They're not making those decisions based on merit or whatever they feel at that time. They're reacting.
In a 2-income household, both parents working, like, what's the point? I mean, you should be enjoying this, and your kids should know you and know you well. So it begs the question, do you want to sacrifice your lifestyle and maybe your location to go out and get away from this madness? Or do you try to do what everybody's doing, which frankly is not working? I mean, if you look at rates of depression and anxiety and suicide amongst young people in this country, these things are all on the uptick.
Yep.
And if you look at the history of the pharmaceutical industry and mood stabilizers, you'd think that number would be plummeting. I just finished up this book by a guy named Wilkinson called Anatomy of an Epidemic, and I would urge anybody considering getting
I'll have to read this. What is it? Anatomy
of an Epidemic. And Wilkinson is the author's name. And I would encourage anybody with a young person in their life who they're considering getting in on these mood-altering drugs to give it a read. I would consider anybody that's an adult that's been involved in this and has been using these drugs to take a good read. And what you'll find that it's kind of driven by economics. And they marketed all these Adderalls and Ritalins and Paxils as these kind of silver bullets to slay the mental health dragons. But it's not like penicillin. It's not like a polio vaccine that's a very directed, specific use of a medicine. They basically had these drugs and tried to kind of assign them as solutions to social anxiety without really understanding maybe what's going on there.
Sure.
And none of the studies that Wilkinson references, there it is right there.
Whitaker?
That none of the studies have shown any effectiveness beyond the short term for any of these drugs. And you've got folks that have been on these for 15 years. That's wrapped up in your identity.
Terrifying.
You want to talk about a pigeonhole that you get stuck in. And now you're in a high power position, or your job, it requires a lot of attention to detail. And now you don't believe you can get through your day to day without this. I mean, what a terrible position to be in, and what a terrible idea to transfer to a young person that, hey, we've identified a flaw in you. Oof. We've identified a flaw that is intrinsic to your brain chemistry. This will never change. So we're going to start giving you pills now, and you're going to need these pills to be normal forever. Imagine if anything happened to a young kid that was less than optimal, and you said, hey, I know you're going through this right now. It's never going to change. Here's a pill. Just keep taking these. I mean, it's insanity. That you're taking away the self-empowerment potential of a young person by doing something like that.
Which brings me to our healthy lifestyle, right?
Yes, sir. Now this is the fun. I feel like we've been a little negative up to this point. We had a little positivity there on the basketball thing, and let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. Well, I want to know, because I know we're healthy guys. We work out, we stay active, we stay challenged, whether that be new sports we pick up or whatever we're doing. We also are very careful and conscious of what we eat and put in our bodies. Yeah. A, because they make us feel good, and B, because that's how you have longevity in this life.
The longevity, and let's be honest, there's a little bit of vanity in it too.
100%. And vanity is a good thing.
Yeah.
I don't think vanity is a bad thing. I think it's okay to be a little vain, because if that gets you in the gym, if that gets you working out, getting that heart rate up, eating well, then those are all things that are going to make you feel better, like a mental scrub for your mind.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
So to talk about what you do on a daily basis, because I know we've been talking about this lately, but I'd love to hear what you're doing. I know you're doing intermittent fasting.
Yeah, so it's and we referenced her earlier, Dr. Patrick.
Sure.
Time controlled eating, and she kind of I think she takes more anthropological perspective and looking at the vast history of humans.
Sure.
And that we typically only ever ate when the lights were on, which the sun is out shining. And so the digestive tract has only evolved to work for those 8 to 10, 12-hour max periods during the day. But now with the Industrial Revolution and electricity, we're finding that folks are getting up at 6 o'clock, starting their cup of coffee, which gets the digestive system working. And then they're working on into the evening and doing whatever they do, and then finishing up with a late dinner. So they're finding that they're employing their digestive tract for 15 hours a day, which is overloading it and inhibiting its ability to do its job effectively. So she said that the time-controlled eating is something you try to confine your eating to a 12-hour window. Now, the one thing I'd like to clarify, and I haven't had a chance to do, is whether chewing a piece of gum, taking a medication, fires up that digestive tract. She did mention that just something as simple as a cup of coffee would get you fired up and basically all systems on running.
Outside of water, is that what she's saying?
Outside of water, water would be the only thing that she mentioned specifically that you could drink or eat.
So like this morning, have you eaten yet?
No, not yet.
You have not eaten. Yeah. Now I go back and forth, because like this morning I had to meet Tim for breakfast, so we wanted to talk about a couple things and yada yada yada. So I had a bowl of oatmeal.
Well, here's the good news. She referenced a couple of studies with both rats and humans and found that whether you did it 7 out of 7 days or 5 out of 7 days, there was no perceived advantage. So you can build in a couple cheat days, because and let's be real, moderation is the key to everything.
100%.
Even moderation.
Yes, even moderation.
So you can build in a couple of cheat days during the week, and it won't impact you on the negative side. And I basically was, and you probably know this, I was a smoothie guy for like 5 years.
Yeah.
Whole fruit, whole vegetable, water, ice smoothies. And it wasn't something that ever dawned on me as something that could be deleterious.
Sure.
One time I'm listening to NPR late at night on a drive back from a dinner, and they got this guy on there, and he's talking about people that juice. And he says, well, take the contents of the last smoothie that you made and lay them all out on a table. So for me, it was a banana, a pear, an apple, 2 cups of blueberries, 3 big handfuls
Almond
of spinach, handful of kale, ice and water.
Huh.
If you laid all that stuff out, it would take me an hour to eat it.
Sure.
Right? And the body's metabolizing that as you go bite by bite, and all of the fibers and all the extras in there are being absorbed in a gradual fashion. But if you blend all that stuff up and drink in a smoothie in a 30-minute window, you're overloading the body and the ability to even uptake that in an efficient manner. And so that kind of gave me a little bit of pause. I said, well, why don't I just take half the ingredients I'm putting in these smoothies and just eat them one at a time? And then about a month ago, I think I ran into Patrick's time-controlled eating.
Sure.
And I've been doing it since then. I'm feeling pretty good. And I think after the first couple of days, you don't develop that craving, that
habitual habit, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of people. They say, well, it's so hard to not eat till 12 or whatever.
Give it a couple days.
You give it a couple days, your body will adapt.
Hey, it's hard not to eat like shit too, but if you give it some time, you realize that it's actually more difficult to get back on that junk food train.
Yeah.
And speaking to the smoothies and the drinking, the speaker that was talking about the bad aspects of blending food and juicing food and the body's inability to recognize that and assimilate it accordingly also applies to pretty much all caloric intake that you're drinking. That the one thing that we haven't ever evolved physically to do is receive any calories in a liquid form. I mean, yeah, the milk, sure, and we all know we kind of want to stay away from that anyhow. But for the vast majority of humanity, it was water and only water. So I would tell anybody looking to modify their diet and maybe shed some pounds and get healthy is stop drinking shit.
Yeah.
Drink water, you know? And if you quit coffee, yeah, those first 3-4 days are rough. But I quit coffee 6 years ago. I don't miss it. Sometimes I'll smell it and I go, gosh, that smells good. But it never tastes as good as it smells, even when you're drinking it. So
no, I've been off caffeine in general for probably a good month now.
Yeah.
And I find I have longer sustained energy throughout the day. If I spike myself with that caffeine, if I give in, I'm going to have a crash.
Sure.
The body is in flux, right?
Yeah.
You do something to spike it, you're going to have a low.
Yeah.
So just to live consistently, right?
Yeah.
I just find that I have longer sustained energy. And so you're not doing coffee.
Yeah. So it's the incremental stuff, right? So you can just start with one thing. Like for me, and a little background, I was getting a little bit heavy. I blew up a foot like in 2014, playing softball of all things. And I was basically on crutches for 6 weeks. And then I was working a lot. And so I put on a little bit of weight, nothing like beyond, but yeah. So I'm down about 30 pounds over where I was at that point.
Wow.
And the first thing I did is says, man, you need to stop eating ice cream. This is like your one vice. You're pretty clean across the board, but you're eating this ice cream. Just give that one thing up. Yep. See what happens. 15 pounds, boom. So people look at this as this big daunting task, but if you incrementally incorporate certain things into your habits, they become second nature. Just like brushing your teeth in the morning, it just is what it is, and it actually saves people money in the long run. You know how much, fellow reps of mine, they always want to meet up in Starbucks when we get together. And I'm going,
sure.
So these people got $150 a month on Starbucks tab.
Yeah.
Gosh, if you could add that up, what would you do with it? You could go on a little trip somewhere, a couple weekends,
Yeah.
So, limiting the caloric intake as far as what you're drinking. When it comes to the alcohol, we touched on the red wine.
Yep.
My buddies that are into beer, that are complaining about beer guts, I go, put the beer down and drink some red wine if you must.
Yeah.
And so paying attention there, I think, is the big key. I think for the entire country is drinking way too many calories. And I'll go into my offices and bring Starbucks to the gals, and it's always got a big dollop of whipped cream on top, and it's just like, man,
Jesus,
you guys are all on a liquid fast this week, but you're just taking 500 calories in a drink, in an ice drink. So that's one thing. The sleep is huge. People are not getting enough sleep. They're not getting quality sleep, and I think a big reason they're not getting the quality sleep is that they've inundated their system with crap. If you got a bunch of sugars running around rampant in your system, you've got caffeine, you got alcohol, you're not getting your workouts in consistently. Like we all know what it is to sleep after you've been lazy all day, or to lay your head down after you busted your ass.
Yeah.
And there's a certain type of sleep that comes with the latter.
Deep.
And it is absolutely part of the entire circle.
Yep.
And if you start incorporating a couple incremental things into your life, then it all fits together like a nice, tidy little puzzle.
Yep.
And then once those puzzle pieces are together, you're maybe not complete, but you're in a position to recognize, hey, this little habit here does not belong, you know? And I'm a big fan of deprivation. You know, like I think that depriving yourself of things is great. You know, back to the college. I used to like to smoke a little reefer in college because you live in Santa Barbara. That's come on, it's paradise, right? But a month and a half before season came about, I always took that and put it away. And put it away till after the season. But I'd always like keep myself a little sack around the house. So when I opened up my sock drawer to leave the house, I'd see it and I'd know what I was sacrificing. That my girl Mary Jane, who I love so much, was getting left out in the cold because this basketball shit is more important right now.
Yeah.
And every year I like doing a little bit of time away from all my vices, whatever they may be.
Well, just also to like going back to just less of everything, right? Just less of everything, you know, and maybe more water. Maybe more water. And when I hear people say like, well, it's so hard, you know, I see, so I was at my sister's house last night. I was at her, she's in college, and I had given her a ride home, and she and her friends were there, and they had been out drinking. And the habitual habit of them going to eat snacks, you know, that late night food. I told them, I said, go to bed hungry. Go to bed hungry. You know, you're going to get a better night's sleep. There's a ton of studies that say eating late really fucks up your sleeping patterns.
Yes, it does.
And just, you know, depriving yourself. You know, you don't need to eat. You're going to be fine. Food is plentiful. It's everywhere we fucking look.
How does that empty stomach full of booze feel the next morning? Right? So that food is masking. It's helping to, I mean, that was our whole thing. Oh, get that Freebirds in and La Vista before you go to bed. Soak up that booze. Well, then you're kind of masking the true effect of the booze. If you face that thing head on the next morning, then you really feel like shit and you go, man, maybe I'll stop a little early next time. You know?
Maybe I'll have 2 drinks instead of 6.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And maybe I'll have more fun that way. You know?
Maybe
I
wake
won't.
up. Maybe I'll, you know, go to the gym. This other thing too, I see people who like really take their hangovers and they don't do, like, you're gonna go out, you're gonna have a good time. That's inevitable in life. Like we said, moderation, right? They're gonna have nights like this, but get up and get your ass to the gym. Go do something. Go for a run. You will feel so much better.
100%.
You know, these people that lay around all day and lethargic, you just feel worse and worse about yourself. And then you feel worse because you haven't worked out, and then you don't sleep as well the next night.
And you know, I think that people don't understand that they have the ability to do that.
They do.
They could power through it if they wanted. Great story back to the basketball days. My good buddy Jones and I, we used to just hit the town. You know, he was my small forward shooting guard, and we were just peas in a pod. Now, Jonesy liked those big girls, so it was great. We go out and hit the bars, and every big girl's got a super hot friend. So we were like peas in a pod, but we'd hit the town all the time. And we had this recruit come in from Oregon. Well, I won't name him out. And he thought he was going to be a little bit of a drinker too. And he was dragging ass in practice. And coach pulled him in. And I only know this because coach told me about the conversation that, you know, this kid goes, he's getting the 6th degree from 5th degree from coach. Like, hey, you're boozing hard. You're not being dedicated. And the kid goes, well, what about Brea and Jones? You know, like,
sold you down river.
Those guys get after it.
What a
coach
prick.
Goes, those guys go after it, and then they come in and they kick your fucking ass all over the gym. What do you want me to say to those guys? Hey, you're not those guys. That's not for you, you know? So it's kind of funny. Some people can pull it off and some can't, just like with anything. But I'm a firm believer in, like I like to deprive myself. I like to punish myself. And then I like to enjoy myself. And if you don't take a step away from things that you enjoy in life, you don't sustain that enjoyment of them.
It's by gluttonous too. It's just like doesn't feel good.
Taking a step back sometimes allow you to enjoy it even more.
Or
decide, hey, maybe it's not for me. So, you know, whatever it is, especially if it's something that you could probably be construed as negative to your overall wellness, like just put it on the shelf for a little while. See if you really need it.
I like it. Well, any other thing you want to talk about?
Dude, we could talk all day, buddy.
I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really great to have you, man. I mean, I'd love to have you back on, just because your overall positivity about life and outlook is something that I think people need to hear. They need to hear that you can go out there and achieve what you want to achieve. You just gotta get your head in the right place.
And I think you can do it on your terms. I think people, if there's any flaw I see in young people or people in general, is they're too eager to try and spout out whatever they think the audience is expecting them to say. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to give the wrong impression. And I think that above all else, being genuine and upfront with people is actually kind of the exception to the rule these days. And people appreciate that. They don't give themselves enough credit. They don't give their bullshit detector enough credit to kind of see through the crap that people are spouting. And I don't really want to ever fit into one box. And I think that the identity politics that we're involved in, people kind of get pigeonholed in one or the other. And be a jack of all trades, and then you got a pretty good idea of how the world works.
Sure, and then your world doesn't crumble if like one thing's not working.
Yeah, then you go down the path of specialization, which of course you have to. It's inevitable. If you want to create a living for yourself, you're going to have to be an expert in some arena.
Well, if you become, this is a great quote, you become an expert at anything, it's something you love, you can make a living doing it. And so just figure out what you love and what you want to do, and it'll work out.
Yeah. It's that simple. And stop worrying about what other people think, especially a bunch of strangers out on the interwebs, man. Come on.
Interweb.
I mean, it is unbelievable that people are living for folks they're never going to meet.
I know.
They're out there buying shit to impress people they don't care about. And it's one of my favorite quotes, man. The people that matter don't care.
The people that care
don't matter.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's good. All right, man. Hey, thank you so much for coming today.
Hey, my pleasure. Hopefully we'll do it again soon.
Definitely.